Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CoinGeek Weekly Livestream. I'm your host, Kurt Wuckert Jr. I appreciate you for joining me at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time per usual. Your like, subscribe, hit the alert bell stuff is all very much appreciated. And I want to thank our sponsor, Rock Wallet, our long-term ally in this fight for Bitcoin, giving you access to your BTC, BCH, BSV, Ethereum, stablecoins, etc., including the new money stablecoin, which is the only gasless stablecoin in the entire universe. Rock Wallet, I want to say thank you. Normally, I give like a high energy, excited introduction to the show because I'm in good spirits and I love doing the show. But I have to admit that I've been pretty somber for the last few days because of this Charlie Kirk assassination situation. So I just wanted to start by addressing it. And it's funny because while I'm personally conservative, I'm not a conservative. And so I didn't really consume a lot of Charlie's content. And sorry. And so for me, going back and kind of consuming content in the wake of his assassination, realize how much he has in common with a lot of us. Just a normal guy. He was just a civilian who really cared about an issue, and he became very well known. He became quite famous simply for caring passionately and expressing himself effectively on an issue, and on an issue that was extremely contentious, obviously contentious to the point of bringing people to the point of wanting to kill him in public. And that sort of thing about culture is part of the reason why I say be good to each other as my closing line on every single show. I've actually been saying that on the air since 2017 because I just never really liked the toxicity in the Bitcoin space. It's always made me upset that something as exciting and as powerful as Bitcoin, something for the cause of liberty, could bring people to hate each other so much. And I've argued that maybe that's subterfuge, or maybe it's just hot tempers, maybe it's immature people on the internet. But when immaturity on the internet turns into actual hate, actual vitriol, and then actual murder and death and other tragedy, that's when things have gone too far. And it's actually gone that direction with multiple people. We've seen big blockers and small blockers targeted and attacked and things too. And I just wanted to say unequivocally that, despite the disagreements that we have on Bitcoin or politics or religion or any of the other things that we talk about, that there is just no reason for there to be the kind of violence that we see in increasing capacity in the world. And so I just want to give a quick, I don't know if prayer is the right word, but just to give a just to give my challenge to everybody to, even when you hate the things that the other person's saying, to do like Charlie did and reach across the aisle and try to have that conversation. So as I've watched probably 10 or 15 hours of his content over the last week or so now, I realize that no matter how angry or how much people disagreed with him, he wanted them to talk through their position. He simply wanted to either be taught, and I've watched him change his opinion when people have a good conversation with him, but then also watching hearts get tender even when they started angry 3 minutes before. And so if we can take something from this tragedy and learn how to behave, I think just learning truly to listen to each other and be good to each other would be the best thing that could happen. And so my prayers go out to the Kirk family and everybody involved. There's a lot of broken hearts out there. Among my viewers even too. I know a lot of people that regularly watch the show have reached out and really are expressing a lot of anguish. And I just want to let you know I share in that, despite the fact that my social media presence and all this stuff, like I'm just a guy with a Bitcoin podcast, right? But ultimately, I want to share that humanity, despite the disagreements that I have with Mr. Kirk. That it's we just need to do better. All of us need to do better, and I think this is an opportunity to take one step back, take a deep breath, see the humanity in the people that we disagree with, and really truly be good to each other. So we're gonna cut the break here in a second, come back with Gavin Lucas, but Charlie, hope to see you on the other side. Hey, Gavin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kurt, what's up, man?
Good to see you.
Yeah.
So let's burst into the headlines. You have an article out today talking about can blockchains and Wall Street can we scale? Can Wall Street do the things that we are told can be done with unnamed blockchains or any blockchain? Love to let's get into it. What inspired you to write such an article?
I think that a lot of people don't really realize the scale that we're dealing with and that we need to deal with to make any of this tokenization.
Oop, might have lost your audio.
What's that?
Oh, there you are. I think I couldn't hear your audio for a second. I don't know.
So what I'm saying is scaling's important. Everyone knows that, but I think that a lot of people don't realize just how big of a scale we're dealing with if we're going to make tokenization, even tokenized stock trading, a reality, let alone when you include payments, when you include data transactions, communication. You're dealing with millions and eventually tens of millions of transactions a second just for those. I mean, I think I saw in that article, actually, I have a couple of stats if you look it up. I think
let's cut through them.
We're dealing with the NASDAQ. Let me just pull this up so I get it exactly right. But let's see, we're dealing with in Ethereum can process 250 transactions a second. All layer 2s combined have processed 21 million in one day, right? That's with layer 2s. And now they have a layer 3 as well, we should add, right? So that's half the transactions that NASDAQ alone did in one day.
Right.
Now, that's be one exchange, right? So we're talking about then you add the NYSE, the FTSE, the ASX, and all the Chinese exchanges, Japanese exchanges, and that's just then. What about Forex transactions? What about peer-to-peer payments? How many PayPal transactions take place a day? I don't even know. These are all denominated in USD. So if everything is going to live on one blockchain, which is the point, is to have that total transparency and time-stamped transactions, then the scale we're talking about is absolutely colossal.
Yeah.
And like it's already pretty complicated over at Ethereum there, we're into we're into layer 3s now, and still pushing 250 transactions a second. You need probably, if even Terranode will get 1 million, right? I mean, and even that's not enough. It's the start, but it's not going to bring the whole thing where it needs to be. So just to emphasize that point alone, the scale is colossal. And then, there's other things that tie in with that. You want it on the base layer. Otherwise, you lose the timestamping and you lose the audit trail, which begs the question, why bother? Just use an Oracle database and I'll use another one.
Exactly. Well, and that's exactly it. That's consistently been my criticism of layer 2 as a concept, is that all the novelty of this technology is based on the fact that it is time-stamped and auditable. So if you don't have those things, like what are we actually working toward here? And I think that's
I mean, even in a sense, BSV has layers, right? You have the transaction layer, the you could call it tooling or smart contract layer, and the application layer, which is the user interface, right? But it's not layers like Ethereum where you actually go onto a separate system. It's
just another network, right? That's
so you don't have to bridge up to the bloody smart contract layer or all connected, right? And the point, if you don't have the base layers timestamp transactions, what's the point? And the interoperability of, say, being able to, I could just atomic swap a stock for a currency and then send that currency to you, and you could buy a bar of gold or a tokenized gold. That's the point of all this, is to make everything, all the walled gardens collapse. And so I wrote that article just to kind of show the scale of one stock market in the US, and Ethereum can't even do 50% of that after all this.
Right.
Which begs the question, what I mean, I think I said to you earlier, Google and 60 other partners are building a AI payments protocol.
Whatever that means. Yeah.
Wow. I don't know. It's pretty vague. It only came out 4 hours ago, and we haven't covered it yet, but I saw it on X. So what we have here is like Accenture, Adobe, Adyen, American Express, MasterCard, all the established players want to build this thing on Google Cloud. Agent payments protocol on Ethereum, which can't handle the transactions of the NASDAQ with all its combined.
Right.
What's happening here? How are people reaching these conclusions? Like,
it's wild. It's funny. I was on the Hotep Jesus podcast like 3 weeks ago, and we talked about the same thing. He was like, what do you think of Ethereum and some of this stuff? And I said, here's the problem. Like, Ethereum is capable of something like 15 transactions a second globally on the base layer. Then you got all the L2s, which are not really L2s, they're only L2 in name. You require bridges, which causes security problems, and those have their own scalability issues. And ultimately, we're talking about something that is so complicated that ultimately the alleged next-gen aspect of such a technology is worse to use, both from a user standpoint, but also an auditability standpoint. All the things that are allegedly novel about a blockchain are worse than the current generation. So it's like going back in time to use a bad tool to allegedly call it next gen. We're moving into the future. And he was looking at me like, oh no, like is it all fake? And frankly, the sum total of the show was yes, it's all fake.
And it's actually sad because it's not only fake, it's almost like you said, we've gone backwards rather than forwards and spent I don't even know how many $1 billion chasing ghosts.
Oh, tens of billions, I'm sure.
To make something worse than the current system. Also, that some people's definition of decentralization holds, right?
Yeah.
And as people pointed out back in the block size wars, it isn't going to hold anyway, because even if you have everybody, and me, my brother, you, and John down the street running a validator, the government is going to want to know who these people are. They're not going to, they won't let it be decentralized in that sense, anonymous validators, because first of all, there are two reasons. One is it's a security threat. And second of all, if everyone can run a node, what's to stop the government from just spinning up 100,000 nodes and controlling the network? It has to be costly and it has to be identifiable. Otherwise, lost the entire point,
Right.
And I think a lot of the people around Ethereum and these systems are idealists.
For sure.
If you actually talk to some of them, they believe strongly in what they're doing. I don't think they're scammers, but they will put their political, economic ideals above practical reality, and they hate the system so much that they're almost blinded to the fact that you have to work with it and bring it in as a customer instead of try to completely take it down.
Yeah. Well, and that's the really hard part about this, is that the incentives are so misaligned, because just looking back, if I go back 10 years, I've been criticizing Ethereum for about 10 years now. But if every time I said something negative about Ethereum, I just bought some Ethereum instead, I would be a multi-millionaire, but based on no productivity. And this is the part that scares me, is that when incentives align to consistently encourage people to be unproductive for the sake of being more wealthy, like this is the kind of weird top-down aristocratic creation level economics. It's very much reminds me of, going back to pre-revolutionary France, where they're like, well, why would we feed anybody? Why would we do like just all these things where it just like we just need to keep benefiting the aristocrats because we're the aristocrats, until everyone's like, hey, it doesn't even matter how much I work, I'm starving to death, so we're going to kill all you guys.
And then, you've said that before on different podcasts about the incentives, but I mean, we could look at a real world example of what happens. The UK economy is pretty much a financialized economy, and the City of London and its financial activities control basically everything. And there is a reasonable manufacturing base and productive that way. But a lot of economic problems and GDP growth in the UK comes down to the fact that you're consistently rewarded for speculation,
right?
Financial markets, and yes, it does rain down, to some extent, and basically speculation on property. But none of that creates anything new.
Right. Well, and increasingly, if you don't have anything, this is the problem. Like, people talk about like top-down economic and tax policy and a bunch of these things, and it's like, look, it doesn't matter how much you tax, quote unquote, the wealthy, because the wealthy don't pay taxes on income, because the wealthy increasingly don't have income. They have equity. That equity they take loans out against, and they're living on tax-free cash flow loans against their all kinds of property that people can't even understand. But the average person's like, I'm making 30 grand a year or 80 grand a year, 150 grand. It doesn't matter. Like, people that are making $250,000 a year are still poor relative to the actual equity holders.
And it's not, I don't know how to put it. It's real because it can get you money, but it isn't real. Elon Musk does not have $400 billion.
Right.
Like it. He can take that and collateralize it and borrow and buy X, but none of it's real until it's in the bank and it's settled, and it isn't. And he can sell it tomorrow.
And can't be. Like you said, like he can't sell it. Like, that's the thing, is like it's all illiquid, and they're all illiquid wrappers around other illiquid assets. It's like,
which is exactly what I always try to explain to people about crypto, is like, it isn't real, man. There isn't trillions of dollars in this economy. It's, say, for example, the price of BTC. What is it today? I don't know, give or take
100K ish. Yeah, 115 or something.
How many bids are there at 100K to absorb anyone who would like to sell at that price? Because I think people have lost, because it's digital, a lot of people have lost the concept of a market, right? If I was sitting across the table from you in a real physical market saying, I want to sell this BTC for 100K, how many people are going to walk up and give me the cash, right? For it, that is how many BTC are worth 100K. After that, when the number of buyers runs out that are willing to pay 100K, it's not worth that anymore, right? So this market cap idea is assuming that every person out there will buy the entire supply of this coin at the current market. It won't.
Well, and that's actually compounded by two other factors too. That Tether is a huge portion of the market. So it's you're trading against a derivative asset, which is you could even call it counterfeit. Like, how many of those tethers can be settled to dollars either at the end of the day? And so that's its own confounding problem. But then secondarily, people keep asking, like, how does MicroStrategy keep buying, and how does all these other treasury there's probably 24 pretty serious treasury companies out there now that allege to be buying lots of BTC too. But when you actually drill into it, it looks like there's just a weird rehypothecation scheme going on where they all have claims over the same Bitcoin too, where there's just a stash sitting on Coinbase custody or something, and they all claim to own but that same stash of Bitcoin. So it's like,
well, there's 2 points there. So a certain person who I shall not name once wrote an article called Bitcoin Banking Old Wine in New Bottles. And you should Google that and read it, and don't judge it on the basis of the reputation of the author or anything else. Read it and ask yourself if you agree that is what's happening. These companies have spotted the threat, said, holy shit, and responded by saying, this is what we do. We make it a settlement layer, and we become the banks on top of it, and we trade IOUs around, and we settle on that layer, and that's how that narrative has taken off. And you've written the MasterCard Bitcoin Conspiracy, which is a good article for anyone who wants to read that. Just don't don't judge it on its title. Don't judge it on anything other than the content. Try and disprove it. Right? Go through it line by line. See if you can verify or disprove every single point made in it, and you will have your eyes opened as to what happened to this economy. Right? So those are good articles to read. On the Tether point, it seems like don't trust, verify is a mantra, except when it comes to Tether, they're willing to make an exception for that. You have a shady offshore company that has been banned from the largest financial center on the planet for repeatedly lying, including being proven basically that they didn't even have a bank account at a time they claimed to have billions of dollars in reserve. And that is responsible for about 50% of the volume on any given day in the market across, Binance, Coinbase, and so on. So Tether, I mean, what do we say about them other than they came along in 2015? I think there was one other stablecoin company.
Yep.
I can't remember. BitUSD, I think it was called. All of a sudden,
right,
crypto became a bull market. They didn't have a bank account at that time. That's proven by the state of New York.
Yep.
Yet hundreds and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars flowed through their account that they didn't have.
Right. Yeah.
On this market, make the price go up in Tether, right?
Yep.
Which is now, if you were, I'm not making any accusations, right? But if you were a scammer and you had a bunch of people who don't care much about auditability and provability, what you would do is use a dollar derivative to pump coins, sell it to people for real dollars, and then put the real dollars in the bank and say, look, we're backed.
Right.
And it could be said that is what they have achieved. I
think it's, without, I don't think I even have to put on my tinfoil hat to go there. Yeah.
Which is scary if it's true, because it means that they actually pulled it off.
Right.
And then the move of, when criminal investigations begin to happen and you use all those dollars to buy the debt of a country which really badly needs to keep the interest rates down, and you become the largest treasury holder, it gives you negotiating leverage to say, just forget we did that, and we
right.
we won't sell.
Yeah, all of a sudden your banker becomes the commerce secretary as well, and
their part.
Yeah.
So this is quite an interesting dilemma, because, all right, so Howard Lutnick owned, what is it, Cantor Fitzgerald is his firm?
Yep.
And they own 5% of Tether,
yep.
which is a highly, highly shady company. Whether it's back today or not, I don't know, right? We'll find time. But his company attests that it is, not audits it, but attests that it is. So they have an incentive to do so, given they own 5% of it.
Right.
Conflict of interest right away. But aside from that, he is now in the president's ear. But the law that they just passed makes it impossible for Tether to just use him, kind of get around, because the Genius Act says,
I was going to say, you mean the Genius Act and probably Clarity Act 2 stuff probably both apply to varying degrees.
Well, the Clarity Act isn't through the Senate yet. It's been by the House, and it's still being debated, as far as I know, as of my last update. But the Genius Act makes it pretty clear that you have to prove your dollar reserves.
Mm-hmm.
There's other rules. I have them written down here. I'm gonna have a quick look. So it first of all defined the concept of a stablecoin and so on. Did all these different things. Does include national currencies. Foreign issuers can legally issue and offer sell stablecoins in the US, but they must register with the OCC, be in a jurisdiction which has comparable regulations, and hold reserves in US chartered institutions not domiciled in risky or sanctioned jurisdictions. Risky being AML, KYC evaders like, I don't know, the Bahamas, or places where is Tether now?
El Salvador, maybe. I think at least they're trying to make those moves, is what it looks like.
Is that a risky place for KYC, AML? Is that,
I mean, it's a nation in flux, if by most metrics, but
many New York banks or London banks would be too happy to be dealing with companies out of El Salvador without a few extra checks, right? And I think that's fairly safe to say. So you have a dilemma for Tether, where they've got their guy who's Trump's commerce secretary, even if he's officially divested and all. His firm has an incentive to kind of smooth things out, but he can't just blatantly ignore a law that the Trump administration just signed off on.
Right.
I hope not, because that would be like really bad and for trust and for everything. But so how are they getting around this, where they have to hold the reserves in a U.S. chartered institution, which they may have the reserves now, but to how can the U.S. how can the U.S. let them do it when they're banned from the state of New York for fraud, literally for lying to the freaking like? So that's a good question. How do they get around that? Can you just let someone back in after banning them from your state and maintain credibility? Will New York allow it if the federal government tries to give them a pass? And then if not, what does that mean for the price of everything backed by Tether and pumped by Tether?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's almost incalculable that, you know, last time I did an audit, there was something like 38 million BTC for sale on the open market. And then there was like you know, whatever the trillions at this point, and Tether floating around potentially. Like there's so many levels of unprovable numbers of assets to settle. It's
not proven. It was a while ago, so I'm sure it's increased now, but I looked at it for an article for CoinGeek, and Tether was claiming that it had more cash equivalents than Apple, when Apple was the most valuable company on earth.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I just that's a big claim, right? Now, people could say that I have believed claims in the past. I still, to some extent, do, without seeing absolute provable evidence of it, right?
Sure.
But that's a big claim. So if you're going to hold me to that standard for believing things that I believe, then why don't you hold yourself to the same standard? When a company claims that it has more cash and cash equivalents than Apple, you kind of want to know if that's true or not before you just take that at face value, because they only started in 2015 and they're based at one point didn't have a bank account, and now they're based in Hong Kong and then El Salvador. Why not just come to New York and show your cards?
Well, right. If you could, you would want to. You'd think, anyways.
But so that's the precarious whole market's in. You know, it's all fake. And even if Tether's back now, I don't think the Bank Secrecy Act and all the things they know I need to comply with are just, just forget about all that, bro. It's okay.
Well, and all of that is on top of the fact that even regulated markets, the companies in New York City, like, we know that they're all lying scammers too. Like, it is.
I love took the books, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest scammer in the history of the world was president of the NASDAQ at one point.
Right.
And
and
the regulators were literally too afraid to ask him to prove his, because of his sheer reputation. And the fact that he just gave them his bank account number and said, go ahead and check it out, bro. And they said, nah, it's okay, Mr. Madoff. We know.
We know, yeah. Like, I don't want it to be awkward at the tea party later. But like, and that's the other thing. But we see this again and again. We've seen it with like HSBC. We've seen it with or like Standard & Poor's. Like, Standard & Poor's is unwilling to do their job and downgrade Bear Stearns and that kind of thing. You know, like, they're looking at these things and like, okay, they're clearly about to go bankrupt. But if we say they're going to go bankrupt, then the whole economy could collapse. And it's like, okay, so then what you're saying is your company doesn't need to exist because it cannot do its job. And, you know, so it's just levels and levels of fake.
It is a company. And then in situations where it's a government agency, you have a completely different weird set of incentives where really go against the boss who's above you, or you wreck your chances of promotion, and there's politics.
Right.
You know, it becomes even more complicated.
Yeah.
So the solution here to all of this would ironically be a very scalable, distributed system where no one can alter the data, where government agencies and public companies at least have to have a public wallet, even if it's with JP Morgan or HSBC.
Right.
That wallet is linked to a scalable blockchain where their funds can be proven instantly just by looking at the blockchain.
Right.
And then all of the decision making could technically be hashed as a you know, or a document trail at least could be on chain too, and then all of it goes away, and the incentives change immediately from, okay, Kurt, we know each other, we've talked a few times. Okay, bro, I know you're a good person. You made a mistake. Well, don't worry about it, and maybe you can give me a job on the board of Gorilla.
Right. Exactly. Right. So one of us will end up being, on the board at the SEC or something someday. And
that's the current system, and blockchain at scale with transactions on the base layer literally changes the incentives, because then we can't do that because we know we're going to get caught, because we can't obfuscate anything from a paper trail to a financial transaction and all the rest. And I mean, I think that's one of the most misunderstood things about blockchain, and particularly Bitcoin, is the data transaction part. The fact that I could hash a document in its current state, and that if I were to alter that document later, the cryptographic hash at the time taken wouldn't match. If I changed one pixel, one piece of metadata on that document, it wouldn't match again the exact hash. And so because of obviously the price speculation, it's like a circus, and everyone look over here, this is going up and down and you can get rich, right? And all that's kind of nerds pay attention to that stuff. The real revolution is like, okay, if I can all of a sudden reveal a cryptographic hash in block 3, and then I can match a bitcoin.org receipt against that. I don't need to spell it out, but that would be a really good demonstration of how Bitcoin can be used to verify data. And then what does that mean for compliance, for banks, for the whole financial system? It would be amazing. But as you've said before, the incentives of the old boys club are there for now, and they actually will not only actively not embrace anything that changes it, but will be hostile to it. And that's the problem with the tech, is that it does what it's supposed to do at scale, but the people supposed to hold accountable will do everything in their power to resist that. When they profit.
Yep. No, I think it's a really good point. If the state is just the most powerful band of criminals, then something that solves that problem is going to be resisted heavily, and I think that's a lot what we've seen.
Well, you can see it in U.S. politics if you look. I assume most of the audience is U.S. or is familiar with the U.S., so use examples. 2 very popular positions across America, across the political spectrum, are some form of gun control and some form of basic universal health care. And neither of those things ever get done by anyone, no matter who's in power. So everything that you need to know about the incentives, even if it's a democracy and it's what people want, it doesn't happen.
It's because ultimately it's lobbyists and corporations and all that.
Corporations are people.
Right. So let's pivot slightly. I believe Donald Trump is in the UK at the moment. Talking a trade deal that involves some blockchain related tech. So,
I mean, I've just read this actually on point.com. So UK trade groups demand blockchain rule in US tech pact. We have Trump coming with Sam Altman and Jensen Huang to speak to our very humble government. That's going to be quite intimidating, about DLT and using it as a core standard of the proposed US-UK tech bridge. This is just the special relationship, as they call it, so basically we just do whatever you tell us, right? And your corporations come over and let us know what the deal is, and our government says, just don't let New York crush London, and we'll be good. So okay, Trump making a state visit to the UK on September 16th, accompanied by them, hoping to sign a memorandum of understanding with Washington on tech deal that could see the 2 countries create complementary partnerships across AI, quantum computing, defense innovation, and civil nuclear energy. All right, so basically it's a tech deal with all of that. Who's the initial thing, isn't it? It's the thing you do before you do the deal. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much, right? Yeah, we're going to talk about the deal, but the deal's already done because I said it is.
So this will probably tie in with a few months ago. I can't remember exactly when. Our National Health Service did a deal with OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, that's previous to that. They did a deal to let them basically use the data and try to update the system.
Yeah.
And I think the government did a deal 2 months ago to basically let them come in and totally revamp the government and how it works using AI. And there were some concerns about privacy and so on expressed.
Sure.
They are a private company and they are a data harvesting company, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it's not a bad thing. The government needs to be more efficient, but it's a technically foreign corporation coming in to the most private affairs of a sovereign state and all
Right. Yeah.
and saying, don't worry about it. We won't look at the data. We have ways, and there's no one capable of really checking that.
Right.
So what is that?
So let me run well, it might sound crazy. I have a feeling it won't sound crazy in about 3 to 5 years, but this whole conversation with Palantir. So Palantir's been given a lot of sort of carte blanche access to things, or at least allegedly. Everybody's the same thing. Oh, no, we're not digging into all your stuff. But if you take Palantir's technology, which is fundamentally, just profiling, what they do is profile everything. For anybody that doesn't know what a Palantir is, it is the crystal ball that a wizard holds that allows him to see everything about you into the future. Okay, so that's the name of their company, and that's that's what their ethos is as a company. But they use that technology allegedly for things like counterterrorism and tracking military operations, this kind of thing. But so then it begs the question: okay, why are they integrating into things into like the domestic U.S. system? Now, Trump, not that this is any better, but Trump has said, well, he's just helping us track illegal immigrants in the country and give that data over to ICE, which is very, very contentious. But
scary, yeah, it is, because you might.
Yeah.
Well, keep going. Sorry, I'm not going to interrupt you.
So then looking at the money people. So you got like Peter Thiel and some of these other people involved, who is dear old friends with Elon Musk, who at the time was running Doge and using his mandate at Doge to dig deeply into a lot of old government files and a lot of these kind of things. So we don't know right now how much information Doge handed to various entities that may and probably include Palantir, which then allows there to be this absurd high resolution profiling of every American citizen, probably every citizen in the Western Hemisphere, frankly, and then adding in things like National Health Service data from the UK or any other. So since 9/11, a lot of people don't realize that when we're talking about intelligence sharing, that the UK, US, France, Germany, like the major nations, they have a joint operation where they just share intelligence. So there is a command center where there's an American officer and a German officer and a UK officer, and they are jointly sharing this information. I believe Israel is also involved. They all share this information in real time in the same office. And so Palantir, which should be a military operation technology only, connecting to Doge, connecting to all this international stuff, like I'm very worried that there is a massive global database that is abusing the rights of probably everybody in the Western Hemisphere, maybe even more.
Privacy,
Yeah, we may not have any privacy at all, digitally, anyways.
We basically don't already, with Facebook, TikTok, and all that. But the difference is those are technically speaking private companies, and they're siloed to some extent. So, like Facebook could know some things about you, and Twitter and TikTok could know other things about you.
Right.
To some extent, they probably anonymized that data. I know that they break it into 3 categories. It's your data, their data, and shared data. So your data is like whose photos you look at and stuff and don't like, and your scroll data and stuff, and shared data is public likes, and their data is what they're looking at. So this became a thing in, like, say, a murder investigation, Well, if you want to find out who was looking at the girl's photos before she got killed, you have to get all the people's data on her profile, because her data isn't, who was looking at her photo isn't her data, it's their data. So
Right.
you get like, say she has 1,000 followers, well, you have to get 1,000 subpoenas, right? So this is complicated, but the point that you're making is larger. It's what happens when all these databases converge, and that it's in control of a company, at least, or a group of companies, of very intelligent people who basically nobody in government can hold to account, no matter who we elect, because we don't have the brain power to even understand what they're doing. Maybe big picture style, we can figure it out like you just did, but like technically, how do you know what they're doing? There's no way to prove it, and they just did. And we've already seen with the, you know, when the Patriot Act stuff happened and Snowden, no one's going to do anything anyway.
Right.
So, like, what does it matter if we find out? It's just like, oh, okay, all right, that's what they're doing now. Okay, all right. Till
it's wild.
Gary, and there are good sides to all of this as well. Don't get me wrong. If they get, say, our NHS data, maybe they can figure out that every time people do X, or when people do X, Y happens more frequently, and then they can start figuring out some cures for diseases that have happened. You know, as long as that's anonymized.
Right. Well, and that's so I don't know if you read my article, I think it was 4 weeks ago now, about tokenizing your genetics.
Yeah, I did.
And you know, like that kind of thing, allowing anybody to then leverage, like maybe you got a special blood type, maybe there's something special about your genetics, and you can lease that to a medical research company, and now all of a sudden that's a source of income for you, but also some gigantic potential net good for the rest of the world. Like, hey, I genetically cannot get skin cancer. Figure out why, sell that product to white people that want to live in the tropics, right? Yeah. And so
the white guys in Australia that have like skin cancer at twice the rates of everybody else or something.
Right.
But you should be paid for that. That's the point. It's
correct. Yeah.
Data, and this is what's happened. Is okay. We're starting to converge on the big picture now, right? So the internet came along, but there was no scalable micropayment system to make it work in a decentralized way. Right. So in order to make it scale efficiently, you had to have middlemen. You had to have corporations. And so if I send you a message, it goes through a server belonging to middleman, right? Meta or whoever else, right? And he's in the middle of the transaction. And he collects the data. Even if he doesn't see the contents of the message because they're encrypted, he knows what time it was sent, by who, roughly the data size, and I don't believe for a single second they're not collecting at least some information about the contents of what's in that, right? And that's his money, right? So he's getting paid to run the servers and essentially route everything between parties. Right. And you get nothing. You get an app and a product, and your privacy violated, which you now actually, but you choose.
Well, you get cheap dopamine hits though, huh?
But if you don't choose to do it, you can live on the streets because you basically can't even do anything anymore without a phone. So this system, which someone developed called Bitcoin, can actually at scale do data transactions too, which takes those middlemen out of the equation and allows you to say, I could technically send you a message directly. A node somewhere would pick it up and sort of relay that data without ever collecting any specifics about it. And just the transaction would be on a public blockchain saying the transaction happened without revealing any information. And then all kinds of interesting things can happen where you typically transact from one wallet, say, associated with your blockchain-based digital ID, and then you can walk up to an officer of the law and prove who you are without him seeing any other information about you. Now, let me just say this, right? So part-time, I work as a nightclub security, right? They call it a bouncer, but I prefer a security officer, right? Yeah. And at least 20 times this month, young girls have come up looking to get in the club, handed me their ID. And I know where they live, what age they are, their name. Right. That's scary, man. luckily, I'm not the kind of person that would take advantage of that, but they're out there, right? So that's just a small scale local version of how, just by trying to prove who you are or do a basic transaction to enter a space, you've given away a bunch of information about yourself to someone, and you don't know who they are or what their intentions are.
Right.
And one kind of person can put themselves in position to get that information, right? Then you take that at an internet scale, and we have no privacy. I believe philosophically, if we don't have privacy, we won't have a sense of individual self. That's the frightening part, is that the idea of a self requires boundaries. Me and you're you. This is my property and that's your property, and this is my spirit and soul, and you're someone else. And if you don't have any privacy and you grow up in a world where you don't even have that, is there the same sense of self even? Like that's a philosophical question that's maybe a bit too much.
Well, I think it's like this weird homogenization, and I talk about this occasionally, but you see these things in public. I think there's a very culty aspect of the ruling class where they have this sort of desire to dehumanize and homogenize everybody, which I think starts with like groupthink politics, right? You get people who are like, the immigrants or the rich people or the whatever, the black community, whatever it is. And you distill them down into these things to where they now once you've properly just turned people into an abstraction of an idea, now it doesn't matter if they live or die, who the individuals are. Like, they don't even see individuals in the first place, partially because you can't. There's 8 billion people on the earth, and so I can't go learn everyone's story and why their individual life matters to the collective. But that doesn't change the fact that every single person's life matters deeply to themselves and to the people who love them. And that can be to 50 people. These are small world networks, right? Like, you can only have a deep relationship with a dozen to 100 people or so.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult problem to solve when you're trying to essentially manage a herd or manage a plantation, which is largely how I see nations in the first place. But
it's frightening because people might think that's just a totally abstract thing, right? So it starts with Facebook comes along, the internet comes along, Facebook comes along and says, yeah, we'll relay your data, and they collect your data, and you get used to the idea you don't have privacy, and slowly over generations, at least what we used to think of as a self gets eroded.
Right.
These boundaries being very flexible, and what you just said of categorizing people, and then a dude gets shot in the throat for stating his opinion.
Right.
And thankfully, it's not normal.
Right.
No one thinks that it's normal or justified except crazy people. Right. Yep. Whether or not he provoked people is a whole different debate, which is irrelevant. Right. But that's the real world consequences of what we're dealing with. Not that anyone didn't get assassinated before this all started, but
sure,
it's scary because the sense of self, arguably, the whole Western civilization depends on that idea. There's an individual, and the rights of that individual exist. But if people don't even have a sense of self separate from others, then all that'll go. And then what the hell does the world?
Right. Well, and that's so that's the interesting. I see one of these comments, Krev23, which is his screen name. We bicker a lot on the internet. Like, we disagree about a lot of things, but I appreciate the fact that he argues with me in good faith, and he's pointing out here that we just watched one of the biggest celebrities on earth get executed, and with all this tracking software, it's alleged that we kind of can't figure out the details. Like, and we're hearing. And here's the thing: there's a lot of very weird stuff about that does concern me from two angles. I see two possible angles that somehow, Palantir and the CIA and the NSA and everybody that's doing all this monitoring, and yet somebody can have an online presence, go kill a celebrity, and now everybody's confused and can't figure out why. Like, so there's an incompetence possibility that is pretty worrisome. But then there's also this potential that they have all the information about him, and they're pretending to be incompetent in order to create some kind of facade. Now, here's what worries me. Like, I want to get to the point because you mentioned this sort of dehumanization and lack of personal accountability. Is that the shooter, based on what I've seen, seems to see himself as sort of an avatar of a group. Now there's leaking evidence that he's like, so he was allegedly living with his trans partner, but that they're also part of a weird group of hard left socialist furries, which I don't know what you know about the furry movement.
I want to know. I don't want to know, but I know.
Yes, and so these are people that claim to have essentially a spirit animal that they manifest in costume, such that now we're having an orgy while wearing like fox costumes or deer. Right. You know, like we're all animal types, and the things that we're doing aren't lascivious sexual behavior because it's not me. Like that deer is having sex with my fox personality. And so
the self and how it affects everything.
Yeah. It's
even to hold yourself accountable to a basic moral standard requires a very strong sense of self.
Right.
I don't know, like if I'm right, and I'm not saying that you know, all data leaks and all privacy and stuff create that outcome, but I have lived in countries where there is a much more collective, even at the family level, where boundaries are very much open and you know, mi casa su casa and all that. And I know for a fact that they have a very different sense of self than a Westerner, right?
Sure.
On the basis that I lived there and had regular arguments about boundaries and so on, right? And like, this is not acceptable. Why? I don't understand. And if you speak your opinion strongly, it's very offensive to do that because it upsets the harmony of the group. And even they get, to a certain extent, a sense of self relationally rather than like without time to sit alone in your room and introspect. You just kind of develop your opinions and so on based on how you relate to other people and who you are, based on how they treat you and how they give you feedback. So people underestimate the whole concept of the Western world, which people seem to want to come to, at least, right? I mean,
looks like it.
It functions very well compared to everywhere else, let's say, is based on this idea of the self, right? And without that, or even a slight erosion of that, or a halfway house, is going to have radical civilizational implications. And the scary bit is like, we also need to cooperate collectively. Tackle problems, not to get into it. I do believe in climate change. I've studied environmental management to a degree level. I do believe it, right? But not to get into that debate. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that's real. We need to deal with it collectively, right? So how do we do this while also respecting the self?
Right.
A scalable public ledger, which allows you to cooperate on a global level, gather data about everything to figure out what's accurate and what we need to deal with, but also allows you to maintain your privacy while not being anonymous, therefore holding the law. And
Imagine that.
That tells you a little bit about what that technology is and the kind of values the people who created it might have had around even their philosophy and what they think. The fact that it touches so many different aspects of technology and how that'll impact society should tell you that they thought it out in a great deal of detail.
No, for sure.
Clubbed together in 2000 response to the financial crisis. So like that, you know, everybody's been trying to solve this since the 80s. Let's just do that, you know, this week because, you know, the financial crisis happened. We'll have
better code it up.
Better code that up. So I mean, that's deep, obviously, but it's something for people to think about. Is this technology and all the things we use? It isn't just a fun tool that we use to do things. It affects how we see the world, how the world sees us. It affects how society works, and even if you want to get into philosophical realms, it affects your sense of self because the stuff you're sticking in that other people are putting out are definitely going to affect your mind, which is how a young dude, probably normal at one point, becomes a furry who wants to execute a dude or stating that his partner, he disagrees with his partner's views. That reality of it, and it's going to get worse unless we use some counter technology to stop it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so many levels of things, but I think the key point that you're making is just how much, if we use technology to secure people's privacy and teach them why their privacy matters, like even just that basic level, like your privacy doesn't matter if you're not an individual, right? And well, and then also like your ability to own anything, like, hey, we're like, you can tokenize something that's yours. Well, there is no yours if everything is a collective. And there's so many little lessons that can be taught by Bitcoin. And if we don't teach them, like we do, like we trend toward, I mean, the more collectivist that things get, like you just look at it, it's a very clear to see the as a nation or as a people or a culture in general become more collectivist. And now I would say, with a caveat, I think Japan is like this crazy outlier on so many of these kinds of things. But if you look at the rest of the world, seemingly the entire rest of the world, that as you trend toward collectivism, you trend toward brutality and absolute top-down oppressive regimes, yes, holding down the individual in order to suppress individuality. But that's also for the sake of the individual ego of the guy at the top, almost always. And so,
yeah. He's everything this is what I was saying about the sense of self being relational in collectivists, collective cultures, is that guy sees everything as existing in relation to himself, which is crazy, because that's why he can brutalize an entire tribe of people to get the gold under their feet without any conscience, because it's his gold, and they exist in relation to him, which that's scary. But you mentioned tokenization there, which ties back to the initial article that we opened with can blockchain handle the Wall Street kind of volume? I wanted to ask you, have you been keeping up on the sort of things that the Wall Street guys are doing with relation to tokenization, like the
a little bit? I mean, I read what comes out. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, kind of singing its praises since last year. 2024, I started to notice that he was getting pretty loud about it at the start of 2024. And then they have their tokenized, let me get this right, BIDL fund, the build fund, but it's, they switched the L and the D to match HODL.
Right.
You have JP Morgan's, is it Onyx? And I know Citi did some tokenized lines of credit and stuff for trade finance. So also, if you look at the bigger picture, you have things like the Bank of BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, looking at CBDC platforms for central banks to settle. So this is going places. Not only individuals, speculating, but tokenization seems to be the first trend that I would say has actually skipped the speculative mania stage, right?
Sure.
Which cryptos went through, and then ICOs went through, NFTs all kind of went through the bubble. Yep. But tokenization seems to have skipped that largely and gone straight to utility, which is interesting. So the point is, anyone who thinks blockchains won't be a thing, just look at all that. They will be. But at the moment, they're still in the stages of trying to control everything and trying to say, well, this is our token platform and it runs on our rails. And like, if you want to use our token platform, you're going to have to come onto our rails. And this allows, I know what they're doing from a business point of view. So if you cap a customer in your proprietary system, and standards for the token system and everything have been created by you and only work on your rails, then you have a captured customer who they go in pretty deep into all this. They can't really get back out and just switch across to another provider if you want. So BlackRock captures a bank. The bank can't easily move all of its tokenized assets to Cities one or whatever, and then they can fees for that forever. That's the whole point of why they're doing it. But I also see in the comments of some big central bankers and so on, it's starting to dawn on them that A, it doesn't scale, and B, the interoperability issue is becoming acknowledged, at least.
Right. Yeah.
So the flip side of having your own tokenized system and your own standards is it doesn't work well with others. And while you get to capture the customer forever, there's a cost in terms of the financial system has to interoperate, and it can't be, that I can't send you a tokenized asset across. It's literally just impossible for me to send it from the JP Morgan one across, or information, because it's different. So therein, where we're headed is, at some point, probably 5 to 10 years from now, all of this is going to come to a head, and people in power are going to say, right, how do we fix this? This system hasn't scaled Ethereum, whatever they're building on, and we've all got our own private databases again. That was a pointless waste of money. We could have just used Oracle databases all along, right? So how do they fix it? Well, they may come to the conclusion that one scalable public blockchain has to at least underpin all of their proprietary systems. But then the question is, how do they then undo all the token standards that they've used, and it will work on one? So that's why I think eventually they own their own systems, they get their customers. It's impossible to move, and all the business goals they want, but they all decide they're going to have one thing to underpin it all.
Right. I think it does end up being wrapped tokens on top of wrapped tokens and that kind of thing for that reason.
So they essentially, their proprietary systems essentially become the application layer.
Right.
Where the customer interfaces, and they've got their captive audience that they wanted, but they're going to figure out eventually bridges and things like chain link to communicate between things, and it's just silly. And
it's weird.
There has to be a scalable base layer. And right now, obviously we're biased, everybody is, but objectively right now, there's only one that's even toying with the idea of 1 million transactions a second for tiny fees, with node structures that can be given court orders to enforce property rights and so on. And I found that very interesting, that was thought out over the course of a decade to play to where the puck is going to be rather than where it was today. And
exactly.
The thought that went into that is unbelievable. And watching it come to fruition since I kind of got involved in 2016 and looked and watched and said, all right, let's see who's right. And 10 years later, it's starting to become clear that even if it takes a while longer to catch up, the idea of scaling on chain and having nodes that can be legally compliant and so on was right all along, man. And it's gonna land that way eventually.
Yeah. No, I love it. Actually, we're 4 minutes over, so let's wrap. For anybody that doesn't know, we do a post show. So Gavin, please hang on. We'll do about 10 minutes exclusively for Rad TV. So for anybody that
awesome.
Yeah. So for people that don't subscribe to Rad TV, if you want to get the uncensored, completely crazy, radical version of us talking for 10 minutes, you can subscribe to CoinGeek on Rad TV and get the exclusive content available over there. Gavin, I will we'll let you go, and we'll talk in a couple minutes.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. So this has been the live free version of the CoinGeek Weekly Livestream. Please join us on Rad TV to see the after show, which will be available exclusively to Rad TV subscribers. I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. This has been, Gavin's great. I love how much he's got his ear to the ground, and we get to talk about kind of a little bit of everything. Like I don't know a lot of high-level generalists, but Gavin is one of those guys that's paying pretty close attention to a whole lot of things, and it's really refreshing to be able to bounce my crazy ideas off of him and get some actual feedback. So good stuff, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate the like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, all that stuff to let the algorithm know that you do indeed want to receive our free content. And I also appreciate you, the people that watch live, the people that comment. It's really one of the highlights of my career that I get to do this show, and so I'm very grateful for all of you. And the strongest reminder that I possibly can be good to each other. We have to be good to each other in order to make any progress on anything. It is the foundation of all economics, is that, hey, I want to trade with you rather than kill you. And that's it's the best way to go. So everybody, thank you. I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. This has been the CoinGeek Weekly Live Stream, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.